Oswald. Now let's jump into it.
These are the notes that I wrote on the whiteboard for this episode, and I will be going in detail over what they all mean.
Harvey Oswald was born on October 18th, 1939. Now, his mother basically babied him throughout his whole entire life, and he was in and out of school because he thought he was too good for the other kids and didn't really want to go to school. He was very antisocial to other kids. He didn't want to play outside, and he didn't really want to do anything with them. He wanted to keep in his room and read books about anything that he could get his hands on. Until later on in his teen years, he discovered books about communism, and that's where he began to become a Marxist. Later on, Lee Harvey Oswald joined the Marines because, well, growing up he didn't really have a father because his father passed away at a young age, and he really saw a father figure in his brother. And his brother was in the Marines, and so Lee Harvey wanted to be a part of that, part of something bigger than just, well, nothing, because he didn't really want to associate with anyone. Now, being antisocial and not going out and hanging out with other kids, he really thought that he was smarter than everyone. And that mentality quickly went with him when he joined the Marines. Lee Harvey joined the Marines in October 1956. Now, when he got there, he was very fascinated with the USSR. Now, keep in mind, this was in the middle of the Cold War, and Lee Harvey, being a communist, was not really something to be proud of if you are in the United States military. When Lee Harvey Oswald joined the Marines, he was listed as being 5'8" and 135 pounds. Now, he's not that big of a man, and he was quite short, but remember those, 5'8", 135 pounds, because they'll come into play later on. Now, Lee Harvey, he caused a lot of trouble in his unit. He still had this antisocial behavior. He didn't want to be with anyone, and he began to focus more on, well, communism and Marxism and just USSR in general. He ordered many subscriptions to different Russian magazines, and he started to learn Russian too, where people began to think he was a commie, which he was, rightfully so, but he was not really an enemy of the state yet. In 1959, Lee Harvey Oswald defected to the Soviet Union with all the money that he saved up in the United States Marine Corps. And since he knew a little bit of Russian, he could get by for quite a long time. Now, when he got there, the people of Russia thought of him as a celebrity, because it was not every day that an American citizen came to your country and wanted to live in your country. So he was basically the talk of the town for quite a long time. And Lee Harvey Oswald he relished in every moment of that, because he thought he was smarter than everyone, and he also wanted to be the center of attention almost, even though he didn't really get along with anyone. Later on in Russia, he met a girl by the name of Marina. Now, Marina turned out to become his wife later on, and he soon got really tired of Russia for only living there for 2 years. In 1961, he sent letters to the embassy of the United States and said, "I want to come back." So he came back with his wife and his daughter, June. When the Oswalds came back to the United States, they moved into Dallas-Fort Worth, where Oswald's mother and his brother actually lived, but they didn't live with them. They did for a while, but they didn't stay with them their whole period there. Lee Harvey was in and out of jobs because he didn't graduate high school, and he was a communist, and once word gets around that you're a communist, nobody really wants anything to do with you. So that was hard, finding a job. And Marina only spoke Russian. Lee Harvey did not want to teach her English, which would later be her downfall almost, but that's neither here nor there. Now, since Lee Harvey couldn't find a job, he was always scraping the bottom of the barrel. He would go for jobs that basically high schoolers would almost work for, or people who really didn't have any business being there. As it turned out, there was actually a Russian little community in Dallas-Fort Worth area, and Lee Harvey and Marina actually visited with those people quite often. They began to develop some relationships, but mostly Marina, not Lee Harvey Oswald. He still kept his antisocial behavior throughout his whole life, and I'm just going to say that now so I don't have to keep repeating it. And Marina, well, she gave some news to the Russian people of the area because they also defected to the United States, but they defected earlier than her, and they wanted to know what was going on in the country at the time. And soon enough, word got out that this person by the name of General Walker was in Dallas at the time. Now, General Walker was a strict anti-communist general. He was retired, but Lee Harvey soon got word of him, and he despised the man so much that he ordered a Mannlicher Carcano for $29.95 from the mail. Lee Harvey also ordered a 38 Smith & Wesson Model 10 revolver. Now, this is where it gets a little dodgy with some researchers and people just studying this stuff, but I'm just going to keep it straight that it's probable that Lee Harvey actually ordered these things. But he used an alias by the name of Alec Heidel. Now, he got the nickname Alec in Russia because they just decided to give him the nickname, and Heidel, there's speculations that he got it from a former Marine in his unit by the name of Heidel, and so he just took it himself. Anyways, he ordered the rifle with that alias, and he began to get into like a secret agent type mode, if you will. He made his own little dossier of where General Walker lived, like the whole neighborhood, and he actually scouted out General Walker for 2 months before trying to make an assassination attempt on him. Now, Lee Harvey actually set himself up behind a fence behind Walker's house by a window, so when General Walker was standing in front of the window, Lee Harvey would have a clear shot. And when that came to be, Lee Harvey pulled the trigger of his rifle and tried to assassinate General Walker. However, it was a disaster. And by disaster, I mean he did hit the glass, but he went over General Walker's head. And General Walker lived to tell the tale. Now, there was speculation in the newspapers and the local Dallas media that the assassins went away in a car. Well, the thing about Lee Harvey, though, is that he never got his license. He always took the bus. And remember that, too, that he always took the bus. Soon after the assassination, Lee Harvey was still in and out of jobs, and he decided to pack up everything and move to New Orleans. Now, the thing about why choosing New Orleans, that's actually where Lee Harvey was born. And that's where his father lived before his father died. And Lee Harvey wanted to know what the Oswalds did exactly, so he began to look through the phone book, and he came across some names, and they were actually relatives. And he went and visited them, and they told him all about the Oswald life, and Lee Harvey never saw them again. And that's not by their choosing, that was by his choosing. He didn't really want any part of them, except when he got arrested. Yes, he got arrested before he tried to assassinate the President of the United States. See, what happened was, Lee Harvey was part of this campaign called the Fair Play for Cuba campaign, which basically was a little communist little organization that wanted to make sure that the United States never got involved with Cuba, to leave Cuba alone, let it do its own thing. And Lee Harvey agreed with that. And some people did too, even if they weren't communists, but it was a heavily communist organization. Now, there were some anti-Castro people in the area, and they did not agree with Lee Harvey. They wanted to get involved with Cuba to make it a democracy. They wanted to make it pure and capitalistic. And Lee Harvey actually was jailed for disturbing the peace, even though he was just standing outside handing out pamphlets of these Fair Play for Cuba campaign leaflets. And he was the only member of his organization in New Orleans because nobody joined, even though he sent letters to the headquarters of the Fair Play for Cuba campaign, and he said, I have several members. And of course, he was a liar. Lee Harvey Oswald was actually known as a liar throughout his life almost. Lee Harvey Oswald actually loved Cuba. He loved Castro. He actually claimed that Cuba was the pure form of communism in the world. Russia was no longer in the equation, and in fact, he did not like Russia as much as he did not like the United States. And also at the time, Oswald was very abusive to Marina. He beat her and he verbally abused her. All in sorts, it was just a very bad relationship. But Marina stayed with him because she couldn't speak English and she had nowhere else to go, really. And, well, that also led up to, after his New Orleans stunt with the Fair Play for Cuba, Oswald still loved Cuba, and he decided the only way that he was going to fulfill his dream was to go to Mexico City and receive a visa from the Mexico embassy to go to Cuba. Now, he couldn't go to Cuba through the United States because it was illegal at the time. And so Oswald saved as much money as he could, and he asked Marina to join him, but Marina said no. Marina actually went with her friend Ruth Payne back to Texas to stay with her for some time, and Oswald was left on his own, and he collected his last unemployment check and headed to Mexico City. Oswald actually ends up in Mexico City September 27th. And what year would that be? It would be 1963, which is only a couple months before the assassination takes place. Now, Oswald goes to Mexico City, and he goes to the Cuban embassy and says, hey, I want to go to Cuba. And they flat out tell him, well, you need to get a visa from the Soviet Union embassy. Well, Oswald heads over there because it was only not even a block away, and they tell him the paperwork will be 4 months. Now, Oswald did not have enough time or money for 4 months of waiting in Mexico City, so he pleaded and was agitated with the Soviet Union yet again. And they, having previous encounters with them, the Soviets actually did not like Oswald. So much so that they told the KGB members at the time, because that was their strict regulation, to stay away from Oswald but keep an eye on him when he lived in the Soviet Union. Now, when all this was happening, when Oswald was going back and forth with Cuba and the Soviet Union embassies, the CIA cameras that were at the United States embassy stopped working. It was that fateful day when Oswald decided to do all this that they stopped working, which is a little weird, but maybe it's just a coincidence, maybe it isn't. And there's a lot of foggy details about what Oswald did and what happened in Mexico City. On October 2nd, Oswald moves back to the United States, having used up most of his money in the Mexico City trip, and he tries to find another job, another apartment, and he went to go visit his wife Marina, because Marina was actually pregnant with their second child, who would turn out to be Margaret. And Oswald went to go find them, and he did meet up with them, and they stopped fighting for a while, and Oswald was less abusive than he was before. He still was a little bit verbal, but that's about the extent of it. Now, Oswald went to go find them, and he needed a job. And look what happened on October 14th. Oswald was told there was a job at the Texas Schoolbook Depository, and he got the job on October 16th. Now, that actually disproves the theory that Oswald knew about the motorcade and wanted to get a job nearby where he would have a perfect line of sight to assassinate the president. The motorcade route was announced in November, not October, so that disproves that theory. Now, when Lee Harvey went and got the job at the Texas Schoolbook Depository, word got out to the FBI. Now, the FBI already had a little information on Oswald because he was a known communist and part of his Fair Play for Cuba campaign nonsense that happened in New Orleans. But they were even more concerned about him when he moved back, because he would try to contact the Cuban embassy and the Soviet Union embassy. Now, the FBI actually started to question his wife and her wife's friend Ruth Payne that I mentioned before, and they started to talk to them. when Oswald wasn't even there. He was at work, or he was off coming home from work. Now, Oswald got wind of that, of course, because Marina told him, and Oswald actually sent a letter to the FBI that says, and I quote, I'm going to pull it up here so I do not read it wrong. Quote, "If you have anything you want to learn about me, come talk to me directly. If you do not cease bothering my wife, I will take the appropriate action and report this to the proper authorities." End quote. A couple of days before November 22nd, 1963, on the day that President Kennedy was assassinated, Oswald kept getting some rides with a coworker because Oswald still didn't have his license. And the coworker, he actually asked his coworker if he could stop and get some curtain rods. What was interesting, though, was that Oswald was living in an apartment that did not need curtain rods or curtains because it already had them. So that was a little questionable, but his coworker didn't know that, but we know that now. And supposedly Oswald went and got some paper bags, which is kind of weird. He got some paper bags, taped them together, and what we people and other researchers actually came up with is that he used the paper bag to hide his gun, the Carcano, so he could sneak it up on the 6th floor and assassinate the president. At 12:30 on November 22nd, President Kennedy's motorcade is going through Dealey Plaza, and supposedly what is reported by the Warren Commission that 3 shots rang out, and 2 of them struck President Kennedy and Governor James Conley, and 1 of them missed. Now, Oswald actually was reported being seen on the 1st floor at around 12. Now, that's fairly a decent time, 30 minutes. And then Oswald was down on the 2nd floor 90 seconds after the assassination happened. Now, to go from the 6th floor all the way to the 2nd without being out of breath is hard to do, especially if you just assassinated the President of the United States, where your heart would probably be racing. And the FBI actually reported that there were no fingerprints on the rifle. The fingerprints were actually reported after Lee Harvey Oswald was found dead by the Dallas police force. Now, I don't know how the FBI could not find the fingerprints if they're supposed to be, like, the best at this, but the police force found it? I don't know. Anyway, Oswald then got rid of the rifle with no fingerprints on it, ran down all the way to the 2nd floor, and got a Coke out of the vending machine and had it open and was drinking it when an officer came in and questioned him if he worked there, and he was told that he did, and the officer went all the way up to the 6th floor to see just what evidence he could find. Now, around 12:40, Oswald decided, hey, the president was just assassinated, I guess work's off, which would probably be the right speculation, honestly. And so he went outside to go hit the bus route that was by Dealey Plaza, but since all this chaos and turmoil was going on, he decided against it and went down to a other bus stop, which was farther away, but it was only a couple blocks. He got on the bus and was only on it for less than 10 minutes when he got off because there was a traffic jam of still all the chaos going on at Dealey Plaza. He then got on a taxi cab. Now, Oswald always took the bus. He never took taxis. Now, many researchers and speculators agree that the reason why Oswald took the taxi that day was because that was out of his behavior. He would never take the taxi, and the only reason why he would do that is because he was in flight mode. He was in flight mode because he just committed a crime, a heinous crime, a terrible crime at that, and he was not thinking clearly and didn't want to do his regular behavior. Anyway, he took the taxi, went all the way to the house Marina was staying at, which was Ruth Payne's. He went there, left $170 for her, and he went and actually grabbed a jacket. Now, it was fall in the Dallas, Texas area, and it's still pretty warm there. It was a hot day, and he wore his jacket, and he actually stuffed his .38 Model 10 revolver in his waistband, and he ran off into the night, or afternoon. Anyway, he went off, and at 1:15, he encountered an officer by the name of J.D. Tippit. Now, Officer Tippit stopped him, started questioning him because the description for the assassin were sent out actually less than 20 minutes ago. And Officer Tippit got word of that, of course, because he's an officer, and started questioning Oswald. Now, Oswald was acting irregular, but he always acted irregular. He denied authority. He hated authority. He was antisocial. There's no reason why he wouldn't act irregular around a police officer. Anyway, Officer Tippit got out, and supposedly Lee Harvey Oswald shot him 4 times, killing him. Lee Harvey Oswald then dumped the shells out of his revolver and ran. Now, there are many witnesses saying that that was actually Lee Harvey Oswald that killed him, but the only reason why they said it was Lee Harvey Oswald was because there was a police lineup. Lee Harvey Oswald was in the police lineup, and the police asked the question, which one of these people looks familiar? Now, the only reason why they thought that Lee Harvey Oswald did it was because his face was plastered everywhere. He was on the news, he was on the radio, and they described him, and with that description, they knew that Lee Harvey Oswald was the one that looked familiar. And also, there were other eyewitnesses saying that day that the person that killed J.D. Tippit was a skinnier 5'10" fella who had brown curly hair. Now, Oswald was 5'8". He was skinny, but he didn't have curly hair. Oswald never had curly hair. He always had brown straight hair, short hair. He never had curly hair. So some of these eyewitnesses you can take with a grain of salt. You just have to do your research on. Anyway, after the murder of J.D. Tippit, Oswald starts running towards town out of the suburbs and goes through a gas station and rips off his jacket. Now, that jacket was later identified to be Oswald's because Oswald only owned 2 jackets, and that one was one of his. And he ran into a movie theater where the movie theater owner actually identified Oswald, called the police. Police showed up. They were going to arrest him, and he came back with hostile force. He started to fight back against the officers, but then in the end they subdued him, and he claimed police brutality, but that's the end of the theater. He then was taken to the police headquarters where they interrogated him. Now, most of you have probably seen crime shows, and you probably know of what goes on. That you're supposed to either write down, video record, or audio record what you're saying or asking of your suspect. That was never done. There's only word of mouth going on after the interrogation. So nobody really knows what went on in there. It's just what the officers told other people later on in the years. 2 days later, November 24th, Lee Harvey Oswald is killed by Jack Ruby, a local nightclub owner who actually had ties to the mob, but we will get into the mob and Jack Ruby later on in this series. Now, that was my little biography, I guess you could say, of Lee Harvey Oswald and the pretty important details of his life. Was he the lone gunman? Was it a conspiracy? No, you have to figure that out for yourself. I'm only here to give you what I've learned, and I'm just trying to explain things the best I can. I claim to be no expert. I don't even have a degree in any of this. I'm just trying to help out other people because I was interested in this and I wanted to find other information, but I was really having a hard time finding videos on this, so that's why I created this. This is a hobby of mine, and I am very interested in all this. And yeah, I hope you like my new area. I used to do this out of my room. Now this is in a cellar because it's a smaller room, and actually I like it a bit more. Thank you all for watching. I haven't decided on what to do the next video on yet, but you'll know because I'll have it out by then. Thank you all for watching. Leave a like, subscribe, do what you want, leave a comment. Thank you.